What's going on, everybody? It's Ryan here, and today we are going to talk about worry. We're going to talk about worrying about things. And if you've ever been stressed out or concerned or whatever it may be, this will be a video for you on how to manage some of that. So I had someone on my live stream, I did a couple days ago. Someone asked about how do I worry, or how do I manage worrying, or how do you stop worrying? Well, I've worried about a lot of different things, and looking back, I can tell you that in hindsight, a lot of them were pretty small things. Or, I mean, it never feels small. It's actually a really big deal when you are worrying about something. However, when you look back after it has passed, you kind of you rethink things and you realize there's just so many assumptions you had that just weren't true. And that's what brings me to the first question. When you are worried about something, when you are feeling worried or stressed out, the question you got to ask yourself is it true? Or even before that, you got to ask yourself, what am I worried about? Because a lot of the time when we are worried, we have all this anxiety and we have all this stress and we're sweating and we're not even sure what we're feeling because there's this significant amount of overwhelm that occurs. And when that happens, you sort of have to take a step back. It's not easy to do, though, especially if you're in a highly stressful situation or you're like going through something and you haven't had any experience with that kind of situation. You have to, this is kind of where writing makes a big difference. When you take the time to write and you just kind of zero in on what's stressing you out. Because a lot of time most people don't know what's stressing them out. I mean, they do, but because there's just so much like input, so much overload, it's kind of like you have this certain amount of bandwidth that you can process and your body just like kind of jams it in. All these stressful things that are going through, like all these worst case scenarios, all what can go wrong, what can go bad. I mean, just all kinds of different things that just kind of like mess with your head, that cause you to stress, and they cause the wrong kind of thinking. It doesn't allow you to be creative. It forces you to think one way. It forces you that, flight or fight mode where you're just like either running away from something or you're just fighting it. And that's not a good place to be all the time. So the question you ask yourself first is, what am I worried about? You really have to zero in on what you're worried about. And the truth is, when you get to a point when you're really stressed out, you're worried about a lot of things, right? There's a lot of stuff on your head, but you really have to force yourself to write down what it is you're worried about. I am worried about X. I'm worried about Y. It might be a lot of things, but you gotta go down the list one by one. You just write down one thought. I'm worried that my girlfriend will leave me. I'm worried that I'm gonna get fired. I'm worried I'm gonna get demoted. I'm worried I'm going to not be able to pay my rent or my mortgage payment, right? And you have to ask yourself the next question, which is, why am I worried about my girlfriend leaving me? Or why am I worried about losing my job, right? You have to be that specific to zero in. You have to slow down, take a deep breath, and write these ideas down or even talk them out. It's something that I used to do, that when I used to be kind of overwhelmed or stressed out or worried, I'd go for a walk and I just talk to myself. Often sometimes I would record myself on a video sort of as a kind of like a little journal, or I would listen, or I'd do an audio just so that I can have a recording of myself to maybe refer back to. Often I never really listen to the recording. I just have it there just in case I ever do, because it gives me someone to talk to or something to talk to that allows me to feel less stupid, if that makes any sense. So when you're worried and you're stressed, you have to ask yourself really the main question of all, and that is it true? Right? That's sometimes a lot of the time, after you pinpoint what you're worried about, what you're believing may not actually be true. If I lose my job and I get fired, everything's going to fall apart and my whole life is going to be destroyed, right? That's sort of like tends to what happens. Your body exaggerates, your brain exaggerates. If my girlfriend leaves me, I'm going to be lonely and it's just going to be the end of the world. And the question is it really going to be the end of the world? Is the world going to stop? Are you going to be really in a really bad place? And you're going to ask yourself, yes, I'm going to be in a very bad place. I'm going to be depressed. I'm going to want to do bad things or whatever, negative thoughts. And you have to slow down to really answer these questions one by one. And that's what makes it hard. It causes the anxiety, what causes the worry, right? Because the worry will turn into anxiety if you just don't ask yourself the right questions, or you don't even take the time to pause and think. So the next question you can ask is, what am I believing that isn't true? What thoughts am I believing that are not true? And it is a little tougher one to deal with because because a lot of the time when we are stressed out, when we are worried, we're believing something that isn't true. And the truth is it's partially true maybe, but it's not fully true. Is it the end of the world? That's completely false, of course. But are you going to have problems down the line? Yes, you are. But what kind of problems? You really have to break things down. You have to take the time to breathe and think. Now, here's a really good question to ask too, is like, how would I feel without the thought? I got this, a lot of this stuff I got from a very popular her method's called The Work. Her name is Byron Katie. And she talks a lot about this method about like, how would you feel without the thought? If I didn't have this thought that I was going to get fired, I wouldn't be stressed at all, right? So it's really the thought. So when you answer the question, what you're doing is you're admitting that it's the thought of losing the job that's causing you the pain, not actually losing the job. Often, if you kind of think about it, most people who do get stressed out and do have problems, usually when the stressful thing happens, it's actually quite a relief. Like, I don't know, maybe you're in trouble and you're out for bail or whatever, you're out on your parole or something, you violated your parole and you're going to jail. And it's stressful because you're going to get caught or they're going to get you or whatever, right? They get you, and then it's a relief, right? You're not running from the cops anymore. That's a terrible example, or just a weird example. Another one is, someone I talked to, a good friend of mine, had his car repossessed. I had my car repossessed. And in my friend's particular situation, he told me that, like, once they relieved the car, because he worked so hard to hide the car so they wouldn't steal, when they wouldn't repo it. But once they got rid of it, it just felt like this huge weight came off his shoulders, right? So the anxiety of having to hide the car, trying to figure out how to keep the car. Well, when the car was gone, it was like the stress was gone. And a big distinction about that is determining the difference between reality and not real, or manufactured. Because a lot of it's the thoughts, it's the ideas, it's our imagination that blows things out of proportion. And it's really zeroing in on these questions that help you determine what is best for your thinking, what is best for, just to put things into proper perspective. Because the thing is, like, again, when we're worried, excessively worried, what happens a lot of the time is that we're just thinking about so many different situations, so many different probabilities and outcomes, and so many what happens if this happens and this happens. We're thinking about, if this happens, what's going to happen next, and what's going to happen next after that, or what if this happens instead, right? There's just a lot of this going on, and you have to find a way to get yourself to go down one single path of thinking. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk to you about sort of a couple stories in my mind, stories that I've had about worry. And one of them was getting fired or getting demoted. I had a situation at work when I was working at the gym, and I was a fitness manager managing trainers. And I was worried that, I was going to lose my job. And a lot of it was stemming from the fact that I wasn't hitting performance numbers. And because of this, I kind of thought, I was like, okay, well, then if I lose this job, what other job am I going to get? What's going to happen to my rent? What's going to happen to my mortgage? How am I going to support my children? This is going to be the worst thing ever. I blow things out of proportion, causing all this stress. And in some ways, it could be a good thing. It could be something that could be good for me. It could be okay. But I take it so out of proportion that it just causes me to sort of get in that flight or fight mode and make a lot of rash and basically burn more energy than necessary to sort of do the proper thinking to make sound judgment. Because when you get in this stressful state of excessive worry, you just can't think straight eventually, right? You start to go down the road of not being able to see creatively. But again, it's a lot easier to look at things when you look back. When you look at, it's a lot easier to put things in perspective, and I was really worried about. Of course, in a situation, I was in a stressful situation where I was going to lose my job or get demoted or just have a severe pay cut and be under lots of issues and suffering. But looking back, and kind of thinking this through after the fact, right? If I did lose my job or got demoted, I could still get a job. Right? I can still be a personal trainer. I'm sure I'll be making a lot less money, or maybe a little bit less money, but I'd still have a job. I'd still have an opportunity. In worst case scenario, if I can't pay my mortgage or my rent, I could ask the mortgage company for help and ask for an extension of some kind and tell them my situation. In worst case scenario, if I do go into foreclosure, it usually takes them like 30 to 60 to 90 days to foreclose the house anyway, sometimes longer. If it's rent, they got to evict you. So you still have a place to stay and figure things out. So worst case, super worst case, the worst case wasn't actually that bad, right? Because there's plenty of time to save money. Like, I was even thinking in my head, like, well, if I can't pay my mortgage and we're going to end up moving and we're going to, rent someplace else, I'm going to go ahead and just like not pay my mortgage, and this is terrible, but then just not pay the mortgage, just save the money, right? I mean, it's an option. See, like, just having that creative thought, although maybe ethically not the best thing, but in your mind, like, it just gives you another choice and option to sort of be more creative. Because I could only look at that perspective only essentially looking back, right? Because I was so stressed out, or I didn't have the question questions or strategy or the maturity or the guidance to sort of ask myself these things, because it just wasn't easy to do. But I'm going to give you the tools here. I'm asking you these questions, right? So what are you worried about? What makes you worry? And then you have to ask your question, answer that question. Then you got to ask yourself the next question, is it true? Because a lot of the time we don't even know what we're worried about, right? When you're stressed out, you may be amped up for lots of different reasons. It could be, that you're stuck in the house and you can't go out with your friends and you can't spend time with your family. You can't see the people you love. And then there's other things that are sort of harder to identify. This is kind of where the self-awareness makes a big deal over time. And it's all, at the end of the day, what this is all but self-awareness. So that's pretty much all I got. I would just say the last thing, just to kind of really take this home, if you've gotten this far into the video, is to realize you have to think about what is the one thing that you're worried about that's stressing you out, if you are worried about something, and just ask yourself the question, what are you worried about? What are you really worried about? And really identify that question. I'm worried I'm not going to be able to do a good job. I'm worried I'm not going to be able to hit the goal. And then you have to ask the next question is, why am I worried I'm not going to hit the goal? Well, because then I'm going to be breaking my word, or I'm going to lose my job, or I'm not going to disappoint somebody. Okay, so the question is, if you disappoint somebody, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Are they going to disown you? Are they not going to be your friend? Are they going to fire you? It's going through these logical steps. Everyone's situation is a little different, so it's really hard to sort of, I'm just trying my best to kind of do a blanket statement of generalization. Again, there really isn't a lot to worry about in this life, especially if you have a roof over your head and you have internet connection, and you're watching this video, and you can afford food, and you got a job, or you have some sort of income or savings, and you have, there's just not much to worry about unless you're like on your deathbed or you're really poor, right? And chances are, if you're watching this video, maybe you're not doing great, but you're definitely not like on the streets. And if you are, I don't really have anything to say about that. But that's the first thing that came to mind. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to leave a comment or make a suggestion for some piece of content you want me to make, leave a comment below. Click like if you haven't already. Subscribe if you aren't a subscriber. And I'll see you guys all on the next video.